Most people at this event have seen necessity, oil, water, and climate resistance, which will continue to be part of the fundraising for Stop Line through February 21st. Tara, you were featured in the film, and I know people are wanting to hear more about what is currently happening on the ground with Line 3 resistance, as well as what are the most important things that can be done to support your efforts to stop this pipeline. I'm going to have you and Tasia start us off with an update about what it's like right now on the front lines, and then talk a little bit about the camps and recent resistance actions.
Sure, Buji Ginawa, Jabawekwe Indigenous Cause Makolan Dudame Gojing and Dunchaba. My name is Tara Haska. I'm Bear Clan from Couchiching First Nation, founder of GNU Collective and tribal attorney. Thank you for creating this space and for hosting this space. For those who have seen the film, you've taken a step further than me. I still haven't even actually seen it. Been living out here in our encampment that's about 200 yards off the proposed Line 3 route for the last 3 years. We saw what was coming and we knew it was coming. That's actually when I met Jan. Was 2 summers ago now, when they started building Line 3 around the state of Minnesota, and they were starting to purchase up land all over the place. Enbridge bought a bunch of land, and they were clear cutting on their land at that time. And I think that's what you see in the film, because she followed me out there and followed a few of us around. Yeah, so what it's like now, the governor of Minnesota and his administration gave the final green light to Line 3 back on December 1st is when construction formally began. So it's just been an all-out push to defend this beautiful place from the destroyers that are interested in profiteering, and they're interested in basically throwing under tribal people yet again in their interests of destroying the earth for profit. I mean, that's where we're at, and there's been a bunch of beautiful resistance also. The reason that we started as early as we did was because, like I said, we knew it was coming, and we started to build and to grow and to make community among fellow resistors who are, frankly, mostly young people who want to have a world to live in and a world to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Line 3 goes through, or would go through, 800 wetlands, 200 water bodies, including the Mississippi River, terminating at the shore of Lake Superior. It's absolute insanity to even be thinking of expanding the tar sands by 10% through this project. We're doing our best to not only stop construction here on the ground and delay construction, but to bring our message to the Joe Biden administration, because our own governor will not stand with us. And we're working those angles and also engaging in a defund campaign that's going to launch tomorrow called Defund Line 3. Thank you for touching on that. In my intro, I'm not defending fossil fuels, I'm defunding fossil fuels. Big difference. But I'll pass it off to Tasia so she can give you more.
So Tasia, maybe you could tell us about the Magizi camp and talk a little bit maybe about why it's so critical for Line 3 mobilization at this very moment.
Uju, Tabiki Giza Skishikwe, Nindishikas, Nagachi Wanang, Indunjiba, Migazi Doram. My name is Tasia Martineau. I'm a Two-Spirit Indigenous anarchist. I'm the co-founder of Gitchigumi Scouts and founder of Camp Migazi. Yeah, I don't know. So we're actually the third camp that's gone up where I'm from, which is the Fond du Lac Reservation. Before us, there was Camp Mukwa and Camp Mayingan. And, you know, we try to reference them as often as we can because it just shows the way resistance evolves. You know, Mukwa and Mayingan ran, and now Magizi will fly. And, you know, we're really happy to have had the opportunity to learn from all of the amazing, beautiful people that we've met on this journey, you know, of stopping Line 3. You know, we stand in solidarity with the GNU Collective and the Red Lake Treaty Camp and all the camps out there who are, you know, putting themselves on the line to stop Line 3, because at this time that's necessary and it's needed, you know, because they're burying it like every day. More and more of that pipe is being buried into the ground. and they're going so quick that they're literally killing people. Their own subcontractors, their own workers are dying because they are trying to put this pipeline in so quickly that they're ignoring all of their safety protocols. They're ignoring all of their OSHA rules because they're ready and they're prepared to know, like, they can afford to pay those fines. It does, and they don't answer to no one. They don't answer to no one, but they will answer to us. And so what we've been doing is every day, every single day, we're out there, you know, like, we're putting ourselves on the line. But it's mostly, you know, when I look at the fight overall, it's mostly Indigenous women who are leading this. And that's beautiful and that's powerful because, you know, we come from matriarchal societies, you know, and women can be warriors, you know. It's thanks to, you know, strong women like Misty Babineau and strong women like Tara Hauska that I'm able to stand there, you know, on those easements and be like, no, women are warriors, but we need our men to stand up. We need our men to protect us. You know, Enbridge Line 3 is being built every day. And every day we're putting ourselves in front of machines, locking down, climbing onto pipes, into trenches, and blockading roadways. You know, the very spot I learned to build a fire and speak my language has been desecrated by this company. You know, they took all of that dirt that they used to tear up the Rock Nation there to build this pipeline, and they placed it on top of a spot where they were, you know, a place that we were doing ceremonies at. And it was intentional. They knew what that spot meant to us. You know, we need more bodies and we need more people, and we need more men. You know, I want to call upon the warriors of all tribal nations to stand strong and speak for the Rock Nation, whose voice is unheard by those who don't know how to listen. I want to call upon the men to do their duty and protect us women who are out here every day on the front lines. I call upon my uncles and brothers to take up in prayer in a way that when we storm these easements, our collective voices shake the very foundation of white supremacy that the Enbridge Corporation is built upon. You know, like, we're calling for warriors because the time for action is now. We've tried everything. You know, we went to the PUC, we wrote letters and appealed to the RBC, but they're building this thing as fast as they can. And, you know, when they do this, I worry that those of us in its direct path are going to end up buried beneath it. And, you know, we're ready and we're prepared to take people in at camp. You know, we just need more people. We need more help out here on the front lines. It's cold and it's scary, but resistance is necessary and needed. And, you know, like, it's needed now. Yesterday.
Thank you. Tara, I understand that Enbridge has loans due at the end of March. Could you tell us a little bit about the divestment or defund campaign, and what do you want organizers to know, those who are working in their communities, to get people to support the Stop Line 3 mobilization and coming in March? What is it important from both of you actually for us to know?
You know, I mean, Tasha is absolutely right. I mean, the biggest need, honestly, is bodies. Like, that is always the biggest need. And like, the reality of organizing and all these petitions and marches and rallies and all these things, they tend to be places that these projects aren't actually happening. They tend to be places where people are not quite sure how to get involved. They're not quite sure like how to plug in, or maybe they're not someone who's ever taken a risk before. I mean, I think the reality is not just in this struggle, but generally as a people, as the human race, the situation is urgent. We have created a situation in which half the world's on fire most of the time. The global South, climate change is not just a question. It's not a political question. And that means your home's underwater, or it means that you're being pushed back. It means that you're drinking out of bottles, and you probably have been for a while because the water is contaminated. It means that you are in an extractive situation in which, you know, your literal home is disappearing in front of your eyes. And we're seeing iterations of that here in Turtle Island. And with a situation that's so urgent, I think that our response needs to be equally urgent. It means that we have to be willing to take risks, to actually stand with our words, and to give voice to Mother Earth and give voice to the voiceless. And so that is the biggest need. I mean, people send us things, and that's appreciated. It's appreciated to get like warm clothes and the things that we need to be out here. I mean, it's 30 below zero like all weekend, you know what I mean? And I understand y'all are in a power shortage. I mean, we don't have any power. I'm using candlelight right now and my headlamp so you can see my face. We don't have Wi-Fi. We don't have any of those things, but we're doing it because the earth needs a voice, and because Indigenous rights are not negotiable, as they have been for so long by this country. But to the point of divestment, I mean, at the same time, like, not everyone can be on a front line. Not everyone can necessarily put themselves out there in that way. You know, maybe they're not quite ready, or maybe they're not actually able-bodied to do that. They don't have the ability to do that. So there are distributed actions in terms of getting involved. We're going to be launching the Defund Line 3 campaign tomorrow. We did a soft launch last week. Please visit stopthemoneypipeline.com. You can learn a bunch about the banks, the 18 banks that are funding Line 3. They're almost the same identical cast of characters that were funding DAPL when we launched the Defund DAPL campaign back when we were fighting tooth and nail against Dakota Access. And all these people around the world were saying, what can we do? That is a really powerful tactic. You know, it's one that I regularly engage in because I see the results of it, which is you got an industry that is funded by someone, and they're funded by these giant banking and financiers. And when we're hitting them in the purse strings, and we're hitting them where they really care about, they don't care about morality, but they care about money. That is a really powerful way to use your agency and use your power and use your voice. It may feel like you're up against this giant, you know, industry, because you are. It's a financial industry. But at the same time, like, you can guarantee that those meetings at Wells Fargo all of a sudden got a lot easier to get when there was 67 banks shut down in a single day in Seattle. They got a lot easier to get when you had water protectors who were locking themselves to the front doors and to the teller stands and all of that. I mean, those things are heard by that industry, and they feel it and they know it. And it's showing the cracks around the edges when we use our collective power like that, when we use our own stake in capitalism, which is what we're kind of all stuck in, right?
Thank you. So, Jessica, we know that the law and the justice system treats Indigenous and Black and Brown protesters differently than white protesters. How can those least at risk and wanting to join the front lines support those who are more likely to be targeted by the law?
So a major thing is people who are white, people who are middle class or upper class, you can take actions and not have to face the risks that Indigenous folks and Black folks such as myself would face doing frontline work. That's not to say that we're not out there throwing down. Like, the head of the movement is Indigenous people, and there are folks of color that have been doing actions and locking down. But the point is, so often it's those of us who are, you know, deemed most marginalized that are taking the biggest risks, and it shouldn't be like that, you know. So yeah, white people, middle class folks, be out there, put your bodies on the line and do things that we can't do. Also, if you have funds, like, donate to people's donate to the funds for bail support, the funds for people so they can get proper legal counsel. These are all things that you can do. And something else that I want to note, when we talk about solidarity and acting in solidarity, action is the most important things, because you can say all kinds of things about how you stand with Indigenous people, how you stand with Black people, but in the reality, what matters is your actions. A really close comrade of mine says the phrase, deeds not words. So people really should take that to heart and really interrogate, are they doing everything? Are they doing what's in their power to further the struggle to protect the earth, further the struggle to dismantle white supremacy and capitalism? Because again, like I said, I often see those of us with the least power willing to risk the most, and it shouldn't be like that.
Thank you. I also understand that you're part of a national mobilization to organize folks to turn out to Minnesota during the week of March 8th through 14th and helping to develop trainings leading up to those actions. Can you tell us more about these trainings and the regional caravans being planned?
Yes. So give me 1 second, please. Okay, so we do have a number of trainings set up to give people the support and the skills and knowledge they need to feel confident coming out to Minnesota. We have our outreach and organizing training February 19th at 6 p.m. Central Time. That training is really going to be about how do you talk to people in your neighborhood, everyday people, organizations, groups, what have you, and make them feel empowered to take action. And it's also the reason why I think this training is really important is thinking about the long game, because when we're done beating this pipeline, there's going to be other fights that come up, and we want to be able to retain that energy, retain those people, and not just have it dissipate. So also a lot of it is also like, how do you organize and build lasting relationships and structures that are going to further the struggle going forward. But in the context of this mobilization, it's basically giving you the skills to be able to talk to people about coming out. Let's see, there's going to be a Native Solidarity training February 23rd, 5 p.m. Central Time. So basically it's really important to us that people come out with that knowledge to engage in a good way with Indigenous people who are leading this struggle. So this is one of them. All the trainings are important, but I would say if you're going to come out, you really need to make sure that you prioritize this training, so that we're engaging in this work with respect and not causing, frankly, people aren't coming out and causing problems because they don't know how to engage and conduct themselves. So we have the DA / security culture / legal culture training. Those will be February 27th and 28th, 2 to 5 p.m. Central Time. This is kind of like the meat and potatoes of our training series. Well, not kind of, it is. Basically, if you haven't had a DA training or security culture training or have no idea about the legal aspect of doing this work, make sure you come to this training. It is going to be, fairly long, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be engaging. It's going to be a place where you can learn and grow. I'd actually suggest that people, even if you've been to one of these trainings, come again, because every time I go to a DA training or security culture training, I learn something new. There's always something new to learn. There's always a place from which we can grow. And then the last training will be the Solidarity Action training. This is for people who, despite their passion around the struggle, like Tara said, may not be able to come out. Maybe they're not able-bodied, or maybe there's other things going on in your life, work, what have you. Well, we still want you to be a part of this movement. There's still work for you to do. So this Solidarity Action training is really talking about how you can do home actions and targets and hit targets close to you to contribute to the Line 3 fight. This is going to be Wednesday, March 3rd at 6 p.m. Central Time. And it's around the time, it's close to the time of the mobilization, because again, this is really geared towards folks who cannot come out. But if you also are coming out, come to the training too, because once you come back from Minnesota, we still want you to be a part of this movement and engaged in doing work. So I would highly recommend people organize their schedules to hit all of these trainings. Especially important to make the Native Solidarity training, Indigenous Solidarity training, excuse me. And yeah, that's it.
Great. So maybe I'm just going to do a whole panel question here about what are some of the threats to the larger community, both in Minnesota and nationally, from this pipeline? If anybody wants wants to speak to that.
I mean, I can speak to the climate change pieces of it. So it's the equivalent of putting tens of millions of new cars on the road every single year. That's the emissions impact. Line 3 itself is just a 10% expansion of the tar sands out of Alberta. I'm sure plenty of the folks on this call are aware of what the tar sands are. They're the dirtiest fossil fuel in the world, the most carbon intensive, the most destructive. To put it in perspective, like just this little section here in Minnesota, to power it, it's the equivalent of using all of our current nuclear power. That's how much it takes to send tar sand sludge through a pipeline. So there's rerouting agreement, or there's utility agreements that have had to be reached all along the line, which is another tactic for sure. I mean, I think that generally our focus on locality is also really, really needed. So these public utility commissions, the utility boards in these little tiny counties actually have huge say in these things. It's the equivalent of 50 new coal-fired plants. That's what Line 3 is, like making 50 new coal-fired plants. So, you know, when you're talking about a president who has stepped in and said that they're going to be the climate president, because that's what Biden said, in my mind, you can't really be a climate president if you're building or at least allowing through one of the biggest tar sands infrastructure projects in North America. That's what Line 3 is. It's massive. It's massively huge. And it's not needed. Minnesota's Public Utility Commission is actually being sued by Minnesota's Department of Commerce because they couldn't prove the need for this oil. They couldn't prove the need for the pipeline. And I mean, just the most basic form, I mean, of impact, we're talking about passing through the headwaters of the Mississippi River. There are tens of millions of people who live and depend on the Mississippi River downstream. Minnesota is a land of 10,000 lakes. You know, that's what most people know it as. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of watersheds that would be impacted by this. It's a when it's going to spill. But just the actual disruption of those wetlands also has harm. In addition to the continuation of cultural genocide against Native people. What Tasha's talking about when she's talking about her sacred spaces, that like they know they're destroying, they know it's important. They're not just erasing that for Native people, they're erasing that for every single person who lives here. You know, we're here together and our history is now shared, right? And so we should all have a stake in these things. Another organizer that has been really powerful in this movement, Nancy Bolio, always talks about treaties, and they always talk about everyone's obligation to enforce those treaties, because it's laws that are binding on both, not only Native people, but also the colonizing government and every single person that's living and working in this place. That's Turtle Island to us.
These companies also, you know, the intersectionality between the fossil fuel industry and the missing murdered Indigenous women's epidemic has been proven. You know, MN350 is working on, you know, filing statistics and proving that so that they can do so in the courts, so that companies like these are held accountable for the damage that they cause to Indigenous women along the routes, you know, within communities that are along the route of their pipelines. When infrastructure such as Line 3, Line 4, Line 5, Dakota Access Pipeline, and KXL go up, the statistics that Indigenous women face increase by 22%. Before that increase, 70% of Indigenous women are raped by the age of 15. So when you have thousands of out-of-state workers all filing this into these spaces such as man camps to build these pipelines, you know, it is a terrifying situation for Indigenous mothers all across Turtle Island, you know, to have to deal with that, you know, like when we say defend the sacred, that means so much more to us than just fighting a pipeline. You know, like we're out here fighting for humanity. We're out here fighting for the safety of our Indigenous children. We're out here fighting for, you know, like our sovereignty, which we can't even achieve if we don't have safety. And these men out here in these trucks, you know, they are the direct threat to our children. And, you know, they don't answer to anyone. They don't answer to absolutely anyone, you know. It's terrifying and it's scary, you know. you can follow that work on the MN350 Building a Climate Movement Facebook page. You can contact Misty Babineau themselves, you know, because she's working on getting all of these statistics compiled so that, you know, this is something we can draw more awareness to. You know, the MMIW epidemic has been going on since first contact, you know, and it's increased by these companies. And it's, you know, it's just that victim blaming, that like, oh, the protesters are out there, they're instigating this. You know, if you can't handle someone like protesting or like wanting clean water to the point where like you feel the need to pick off an Indigenous woman on your way back to your man camp, maybe you shouldn't be out here within Indigenous communities. And I don't think that's just me who feel this that way. You know, it's a terrifying day to wake up in a community when thousands of out-of-state workers are roaming your hotels, shopping at your grocery stores, you know, stopping in at your gas stations without the masks during a global pandemic, because none of them feel the need to, you know, protect other people's safety, because there's a great selfishness in them. They just have that need to take and take and take. And it's terrifying. You know, there are so many reasons that this pipeline is unnecessary and unneeded. And I could go on for hours and hours about it, but I just want to draw awareness to that intersectionality of our missing, murdered Indigenous women and relatives and these extraction companies.
Thank you. That was very powerful, Tasia. Thank you. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and kind of start to take some questions from the audience. And so I just wanted to check if there's anything any of the panelists want to say before we move into that Q&A, any other things that you want to focus on?
Something I also want to highlight is, as Tara mentioned, the tar sands is the dirtiest oil there is. It's the most polluting project in North America, or what is called North America. And I want to address like how important stopping this pipeline is from that strategic standpoint of trying to put an end, of fighting to put an end to the tar sands. So Enbridge has put a lot of its eggs in this basket, and stopping this project would be a major blow to them. And more than that, it would send shockwaves throughout the entire fossil fuel industry, which would aid comrades and folks in different areas fighting developmental projects. So an example of this is before the Keystone XL pipeline was vetoed, the Northern Lighting vetoed by Obama, there was a number of projects that corporations abandoned. They had abandoned a number of tar sands projects. So example would be Norwegian oil giant, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Stat Oil, Royal Dutch Shell, the French energy company Total, and Suncor Energy of Canada. That's billions of dollars of profit that these companies didn't make, and destroying projects to the earth that they didn't pursue. And focusing on this project, it's very strategic when it comes to making a blow for the tar sands and pushing a climate where renewables are more preferable. So yeah, that's just another tidbit that I thought people might want to know or think about.
So one of the first questions is, will people who have been on the ground participate or guide in any of the upcoming group actions during that Solidarity Week, March 8th through 14th? And we should add that people are welcome any time there, as long as people get in touch with the camps ahead of time, is our understanding, and there are weekly orientations by camp members that are online that people can do before they come. But particularly during that week of solidarity, talk about the guidance and leadership and the upcoming actions.
Yeah, I mean, I think like solid, badass solidarity looks like, that means it's done in coordination with the people on the ground, right? And that's what's being organized, is something that's been consistently with the folks that are here. I mean, I know that at all the different camps, there are different protocols and different rules. I would say generally, like the best foot forward is to reach out and contact these different groups. We have a proton mail. I can drop it in the thread. We do COVID screening and some basic questions about what you want to bring to camp. I saw another question that was about like, I absolutely cannot get arrested. Not everyone has to get arrested. There are other roles. I mean, people are needed to do jail support. People are needed to help with chopping wood, with hauling water, with doing all the things that it takes to actually live outside and live in the elements. It's a lot of work to build a community and to keep it going successfully, and also to avoid COVID-19 and the pandemic, and to be safe with each other, and to be in community really carefully and socially distanced. I mean, that's been one of the challenges of this particular ground fight, is like, we're operating in the same pandemic and we're sure as hell not trying to be a COVID hotspot like every other man camp that's popped up in northern Minnesota. I mean, those guys are, every county they're in, there's an explosion of COVID-19. And as Tasha said, I mean, there's 2,000 of them here from out of state. Imagine what that's really like when you're in a place that's 300 people, 500 people, maybe 1,000. We see them everywhere. They are everywhere. They're in the convenience stores, they're in our grocery stores, they're in our hotels, they're in every last aspect of anywhere we go. And it's a really, really dangerous, uncomfortable situation for a lot of us Native women in particular that are up in these situations. So yeah, bring in yourself and bring in your willingness to maybe use some privilege that you hold that we don't, is really powerful.
Another question is, how are you dealing with COVID in folks coming up there, the possibility of us bringing it in?
I mean, I can just give a quick answer. For us, we do screening. We require that you test COVID negative within 48 hours of showing up in camp, that you travel in pods, and that you practice social distancing. I mean, just basic things that I hope you're already doing to keep yourself safe in this pandemic. We've trained over 400 people over the last 3 years. And that includes last summer. We still kept doing training camps, but we were very, very, very careful in the way that we did them. Jessica,
do you want to speak to the folks organizing the action about COVID? I mean, it's pretty much what Tara just said, but is there anything you'd like to add?
Just to reiterate, people need to get a negative COVID test before they come out, as well as quarantine for 5 days after that. Yeah, we need to be keeping each other safe and not bringing sickness to the front lines. Another thing I want to note that is important to note, in this movement, people are taking all the precautions they can to make sure everyone's safe. We can't guarantee that law enforcement are going to be doing that. And I think Tasia and Tara could better speak to that than me.
Yeah, I mean,
Tara?
There's definitely like a whole thing, right, when they get out of jail. I mean, and we've seen police officers intentionally not wearing their masks, arresting people. I mean, they've gotten a little more careful, I think, since they see our cameras watching them, and they know that we're in relationship with a lot of folks that are inside Walz's administration, including Department of Public Safety and all that. But yeah, I mean, to be real, and some counties are better than others when it comes to COVID-19 protocols. Some you're going to be in your own cell, some you're not, and that's a risk that we've been taking.
So I guess for those who can't be there in March, what about showing up later? Is that helpful? Maybe speak to that. And also, people had asked earlier about whether if somebody can't risk arrest, is it worth them coming?
I think absolutely. Like my sister said, there is a million different ways that you can plug in. Being a warrior doesn't always mean that you're going to jail. Like, I think people can do very effective things without having to be arrested. And I think there are definitely, you know, whether someone chooses or not to, or chooses to get arrested, that's on them. You know, they'll make their own choice if that's something that they want to do, but that's not going to be something, you know, like we're going to push you on or like demand of you. Um, just keep in mind that escalation is in the hands of the police, and it's always up to them on who does or doesn't get arrested, or whether people are going to be or not going to be arrested. I know that for us personally here in Fond du Lac, you know, they want to try to avoid making arrests because it garners more media attention if we do have arrests, and so that's something they usually try to avoid. But law enforcement has definitely been escalating here on the ground, and yeah, there's definitely a million different things that you can do if you're non-arrestable. And I'm gonna turn it over to my partner who can answer more on that.
Hi, Jeffrey Nichols Henning. I didn't know she was going to turn it right there, but yeah. So as far as people coming up who are non-arrestable, I think that for like arrestable actions to be helpful or useful, not to have them be as useful as possible, having a large amount of people who are there to hold space for them, it makes it so the cops follow their own rules. You know, if they're more likely to give all the dispersal orders, which adds an hour to any action, if before they can even start trying to remove people, they have to go through all of their actual procedures. If there's only a few people there, they tend to get like just snatchy. But having a ton of people there to witness other folks get arrested is still is essential. Without a large group of, without the support, arrestable actions don't go as long. And we've seen that in there were a lot of folks that were hopping in the trenches for a while, and when there was a large group of 100 people outside, those went all night, where they didn't want to go in and like drag somebody up a ladder with 100 people watching. But then when there was just a small group of people that tried it in the morning, and we couldn't get folks to come out because it was too cold that morning, they didn't even care, and they just dragged them out and threw them on the ground. And you know, that's the difference of like a 4-hour action and a half-hour action was 30 people on the side of the road watching. So please come up whether you find yourself arrestable or not.
Thank you. So another question was, what are 1 or 2 lessons that folks have learned from DAPL? And also, can you speak while we're doing this? DAPL, the DAPL fight is still ongoing, and maybe people can talk about the connection between the 2 resistance movements. Or maybe connection is not the right word, the importance of both resistance movements.
All connected. They're all an extension of the same thing, which is cultural genocide and colonial theft, right? Like that's what DAPL is. That's what Line 3 is. That's what Trans Mountain is. That's what Oak Flat is. That's what all these different front lines across Turtle Island are about. It's about theft, and the perpetuation of continuing to endlessly take. In this case, from Indigenous people. We got put in these places, and now they're coming for the last of it, right? Or they're using our places as the places to send through their destructive tar sands, or their oil, or their copper mines, or whatever the new extraction is that they want to perpetuate their endless, or to feed their greed. The connections between the 2, I mean, or at least the lessons I learned from Dakota Access were, 1, the critical importance of self-made media, of independent media, of media that's not necessarily like the mainstream. We need to be able to tell our own stories, and we need to be able to uplift our voices. And I think you saw that with Dakota Access when Obama got questioned in Laos about Dakota Access and had no idea what it was, because it wasn't on CNN, it wasn't on New York Times, it wasn't on any of those news streams, but it was all over Unicorn Riot and like independent media and like all these different places that were streaming it all over Facebook, right? And Facebook Live had just started too. I think there's that piece that I learned from Standing Rock, and I also definitely learned that I think it's incredibly important to come into a space and place with a idea, at least, of how you can support. What I saw at Dakota Access, and what actually ended up, I think, hurting a lot of us, you know, inside after when everyone left, and it was just the people who had kind of like, you know, been outed and pitted against their neighbors, right, was like, and like all this racism had been stirred up, and like everyone was really antagonistic towards Native people for giving voice to their land. And in that place, Bochepti was, you know, all these people who came there to I don't know, it was more about them, you know, and like what they got out of it. So it was like, I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna get a t-shirt and I'm gonna stand out on the front line, I'm gonna take a selfie of it and whatever. And so what was happening when you were in those situations was there's maybe 50 of you or 100 of you that are out there actually trying to physically stop the machine from destroying the sacred place that someone holds near and dear. It's the footsteps of their ancestors. And then you look behind you and there's 1,000 people holding up their cell phones watching you do it. And that doesn't feel like solidarity to me. Like, that doesn't feel like it has anything to do with liberation. It doesn't feel like it has anything to do with real support. It felt very exploitive. And I think that really hurt a lot of people for a long time, you know, including me. I had a really hard time afterwards, like many people did, because that pipeline was built and it did go under the river, and they're still fighting it even now. Right now, the court's saying, yeah, the tribe was right all along. I mean, it's the same thing happening here, right? You got multiple tribal lawsuits that are in play right now at this very moment. And you got a company that's trying to build this as fast as they possibly can, because they know that there's something to what we're saying, right? We're saying tribal cultural resources, whatever you guys call them, these are sacred places. You can't destroy that. Well, if they do it anyway, you know, like before the legal issue is heard, they'll, maybe it's moot then, or maybe it's, what are we going to do about it, right? And so now Biden has to decide whether or not he's actually going to shut down Dakota Access Pipeline. Yeah, those are some lessons I learned for sure out of that.
Thank you.
I think, you know, the DAPL fight, I think it was witnessed and awakened the world. You know, we all stood for Standing Rock. As you know, I know especially here in my home community, you know, they were selling t-shirts, they were selling sweatshirts, they were doing Indian taco sales, they were raising money, sending firewood, standing in solidarity. And my own enacting governing body, you know, they went out there to Standing Rock to take selfies and write their name on the teepee, and they like danced in to the main camp with the Fond du Lac flag, and we're so proud to have it flying on Flag Road, just to come home and approve Line 3 in our own backyard, you know. And I think that was my wake-up call. I think, you know, that was definitely like, there was a fire started there at Standing Rock, but that fire had been burning for thousands of years. And that's that fire that we carry within us, you know, that resiliency of our ancestors that we carry with us, you know. And I always hate to be the one to ask, you know, that, you know, those warriors who literally endured the traumas of war to put their boots on and get back out here. But, you know, now is the time for action. You know, Line 3 is the dying gasp of the oil industry. And that's why they're so desperate. And like, I think the DAPL fight shows, you know, that like the resiliency and the perseverance of Indigenous people, because we can beat these companies. It is possible. We can do it, you know. And I think, you know, the Dakota Access Pipeline fight, you know, drew so much awareness to what Indigenous people are facing all across Turtle Island. And I'm grateful to have learned from all of the amazing people that I've met on this journey who were a part of that fight, you know, like people who inspired me to put my boots on and get out there, you know, women like Tara, women like Conahoos. And, you know, I'm grateful and I'm humbled to be in the presence of warriors, and I'm honored to be here again. And, you know, I think we've learned a lot from DAPL, and I think, you know, with Line 3, we're going to win this one. You know, we have to.
Thank you.
So I was active in the DAPL fight, but I spent most of my time on in the Iowa area fighting that leg of the pipeline. And this is just building off of what Tasia and Tara were saying with like people coming with the right intentions. I think that's something that's really been learned, because I remember in Iowa, like, just to be honest, there was a lot of white hippies. It was like there's a lot of white hippies, and there was, you know, it was strategic for us to be focusing on that leg of the pipeline while folks were also fighting in North Dakota. But then you had some of these folks that were like, well, we want to go to Standing Rock, and what they really wanted was this experience, you know. I mean, I think of it as very parasitic, like trying to like parasitic feeding off of the resistance of Native people for some cultural or spiritual thing that you have. And it would have been more strategic if those people would have stayed in Iowa and fought the leg of the pipeline there. And at least what I've noticed so far with line 3 is the people involved, and in particular like the white folks, I don't get that with a lot of people I've worked with. I don't get that same vibe. Like people seem very committed and serious and respectful, and they're not in it for their own like glory or their own spiritual growth or whatever. And I think that's something that's really positive that I've seen in this movement so far. And I think that also has a lot to do with like people like, you know, leaders like Tasia and Tara making it really clear, like, no, this is what, if you're gonna come out and do this work, like this is, you know, you need to come at it for the right reasons. You need to come out at doing the work in a good way. There's a lot more screening of people, which is kind of like prepare, like this is part of what we're trying to do with these trainings, right? Is kind of give people the support to like come out and be useful and not just frankly just be a burden on everyone else that's fighting. Like what Tara said about people who are taking selfies and or chanting while witnessing the destruction that's happened, like that's not something that anyone wants to happen again. And I don't get that vibe for the people that are engaged in the work right now. So that's good.
Thank you. So can the panel speak for a minute to, a lot of folks have asked questions about the Biden administration and what specifically can people do, what has been done, what is the hope for the new Secretary of the Interior, even though she has a long way to go before she gets approved in that position. Hopefully, many of us are hopeful, but has she said anything about line 3? What can you tell us about the new administration?
So in my time before engaging full-time in land defense, I did a lot of DC work as a lawyer and lobbyist for tribal nations. And through that, have had many meetings at this point with the Biden transition teams for various agencies. So like the Council on Environmental Quality, the Department of Justice, the Department of the Interior, one of the most critical ones, the Army Corps of Engineers. I would say that this administration is obviously taking these calls, and so they're interested in hearing about climate crisis and about the communities who have said no to these various projects and struggles across Turtle Island. That said, I would also look at it from a political perspective, which is that Biden only promised to stop Keystone XL, right? So he needs an enormous amount of pressure when it comes to line 3 to understand what line 3 is, to understand that this is virtually the same project, just through a different people's territory, to understand that, you know, our land, the sacredness of our land and the sacredness of our wild rice is no different than the sacredness anywhere else in Turtle Island for any other people. It's the same as, you know, the sacred nature of Oak Flat and what that means to the Apache people down there, right? Like we shouldn't be sacrifice zones, and we shouldn't be operating like some people are okay to sacrifice in the name of progress, while we can say publicly, oh, we care about climate crisis because we stopped Keystone XL. No, that's not enough. So whatever you can do to pressure the Biden administration by tagging and like uplifting the message about line 3, getting the word out about it. I would say another really good target actually is Gina McCarthy. So Gina McCarthy has been created as this climate advisory position, right? So she actually sits ahead of a lot of these different agencies. That's who's got the ear, right? And so like looking at Gina McCarthy and that particular aspect that angle is critically important. As far as Congresswoman Holland goes and her hopeful her hopeful confirmation, Interior actually doesn't really touch much of line 3. And it's really unfortunate because she does know all about this issue. She knows about our wild rice. We've met with her on this. Both Winona and I endorsed Deb Haaland when she ran for Congress in the first place, right? Like she knows about our wild rice. She understands what it means to our people, which is, it is the heart of our culture. It's why I'm here in this part of Anishinaabe King, right? I'm actually from a little bit further north, but it's who we are, and it's our duty to protect it. It's my duty to protect it as an Anishinaabe woman. That said, the angles really are Biden and the Army Corps of Engineers. There is specific provisions within the regulatory code that allow him to review any permit that's been approved that has outstanding questions or substantive issues that need to be considered, which obviously in this instance, we're saying the tribal cultural resources need to be considered. Like there was never a federal environmental impact statement that needs to be considered. It was all done by the state. State is obviously completely on board with line 3, except for the Department of Commerce, which has said, you can't even prove your oil forecast. What are you guys doing? So yeah, that's the Biden scene as far as I can tell.
That was really helpful. Thank you. So one other question that we get asked often when we're organizing, trying to talk to people about this is, isn't this a replacement pipeline? How do you respond? Isn't it going to be safer and less spills, et cetera? How do you respond to those kinds of arguments?
Tasha, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so we were told the same thing, and we had pipeline meeting after pipeline meeting with our RBC, which someone asked what the RBC is. The RBC is the Reservation Business Committee. That's our enacting government body here on our sovereign area. And, line 3 isn't a replacement project. They're building the sandpiper. They were told no then, and they were told no now. And this is their excuse to build the sandpiper. They have increased the output and they have increased the pipes, and they are going through areas that have been ultimately untouched by projects such as this. And, being from Fond du Lac, we were put in a Sophie's choice. No one here wanted the pipeline, but at the end of the day, our RBC, that Kevin Dupas Sr. did not speak for me. He didn't speak for anyone except for the treasurer of the band when they signed for that permit, because their only interest is generating revenue and income. They didn't speak, and they sold out territories that don't belong to them. They sold out areas that belong to all of the MCT, all of the tribal nations, and not just the Anishinaabe people. These are our treaty territories. Our ancestors starved to death in the winter of 1850 for us to be able to stand here today and be like, these are my lands. But these are also the ancestral homelands of the Dakota people, and they were never consulted at all when it came to this project. And that was brought up multiple times in the pipeline meetings, because here in Fond du Lac, there are still ceremonial mounds here that belong to the Dakota people, and that was why there was such a large what did they call it? Cultural survey assessment, because those mounds exist here within the Fond du Lac Reservation. But the Dakota people weren't consulted. They weren't even a question during the pipeline meetings, and that was brought up multiple times. And, Kevin Dupas stated that until a Lakota owns land here, they have no say, and to honor that, to really honor what Kevin had to say, my ancestral lands, my inherent lands are being gifted to a Lakota warrior, in the spirit of being a good relative, in the spirit of being anti-colonial, in the spirit of recognizing the lands that I stand on, because all lands that are occupied today is indigenous land, you know, and I don't own the land. I'm as much a part of this land as the rice and the water. And this being a replacement project is the biggest slap in the face that they, you know, of course they're going to sell it that way, but it doesn't matter how nicely they tie the bow on this project, it's still genocide.
Thank you. Tara,
It's-
anything to
it's
add
also-
for Jessica?
To give the overview, okay, so Tasha gave you a lot of like really detailed people and places and all those things. So there's like 5 different nations that are impacted by Line 3, right? So there's like Red Lake Nation, there's Leech Lake, there's Fond du Lac, there's Mille Lacs Band, and those are the ones that are directly in the pipelines, like passes through the treaty territory, right? Like goes like either right next door, or in Fond du Lac's case, it goes right down. It goes actually through the reservation. It is not a replacement means that it goes in the same place, right? It means you pull the old thing out and you put a new one in. That is not what's happening with Line 3. Line 3 is an old corroding line. It's like over, you know, almost 70 years old now, or I guess actually it probably is 70 years old. I've been fighting this freaking pipeline for so long. It's like, you know, we used to say 67 years, but now it's like probably like 72 or whatever. But rather than taking it out of the ground as it's leaking, and it would create thousands of local jobs to do so, to decommission the line, to begin our transition to justly move away from fossil fuels into the green economy that we know is there. Instead, what they asked for was a brand new pipeline route through untouched places because their existing pipeline corridor is crowded. So what Enbridge wants, and they've said repeatedly in the hearings, is we want a new pipeline corridor. They actually want 4 more tar sands lines going through the wetlands, going through the Mississippi headwaters, passing through the Mississippi River twice. It proposes to pass through twice, passing through the Crow Wing River, the Shell River, all these different watersheds along the way. They want that because they want to keep expanding their industry. This is not a replacement project. This is a brand new pipeline and a brand new route with triple the capacity. It's almost 1 million barrels of tar sands a day. Enbridge just admitted on the record like less than 3 weeks ago that they actually have the capacity in their existing infrastructure to increase the amount of tar sands that they want to send through these lines. But they don't want that. They want a brand new corridor. That's what this is really about, is getting that new place, that new untouched wetland, you know, stretch of hundreds of mile stretch through northern Minnesota. That's what they're really most interested in.
Thank you.
Diana,
Yes.
I want to amp this up. One of our trainers already posted this in the chat, but I'm posting it again right now. There's a form that people, if you're planning on coming out, fill this form out. And it notes things like what your preferences are with food, what level of arrestability you are. This is something that is really important for us to be able to coordinate stuff with folks on the ground. So fill out this form if you're planning on coming. Let other people in your pod or your caravan know to fill this form out. It's really important for us to be able to engage, for camps to be able to know what to expect during the week of mobilization. So fill out the form.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jessica. So I think we're going to start to kind of wrap this up. I'm going to give the panelists a moment to speak to any. Oh, actually, I've got one more question that I wanted to touch on. What are living and cooking structures like, and what will they be like in March if people want to bring like a truck with a little camper behind it or whatever, water, solar panels, and you don't necessarily have to get into the details here as much as tell people how they can go to how we will be providing that information to them, maybe.
You guys are gonna be coming when it's balmy. I mean, it just hit 0 today for the first time in like a week. So it's been like 30, 40 below 0 every day now. So you'll be here when it's much, much toastier weather. And it'll probably, I mean, maybe you'll even be around when the trees start running with sap and it's sugar bushing time. I mean, I saw it today in the Fleet store. I was super excited about that. They started pulling out their maple syrup sapping operation stuff. So all the filters and the taps and everything. That's really, really beautiful time of the year. I mean, I can't speak to any of the other camps. I would guess it's probably pretty similar, but you know, I mean, we're living off grid. So expect an off grid situation. There'll be restrooms and all that kind of stuff, but they're not going to have running water. I mean, you're going to be outside. You're going to be on the land. You're going to be in community with the land very directly. It means that you got to be ready and prepared to be in colder weather. It's not like we're going to be putting you outside or something like that. Like, that's crazy. There are different structures here in camp and stuff like that. We usually host a lot of different folks, like many of us have, to keep running these actions that we've been doing. But just prepare yourselves. And I know that Tasha dropped her McEasy link in the chat. Otherwise, reach out to GNU. I think there's actually another camp that's going to be opening up this weekend. It's up in White Earth. It's the camp run through Rise Coalition. And there's also a Red Lake Treaty Camp. Although I think, I don't know. I mean, we haven't quite settled on exactly what the action is yet and where it's going to be, but I would guess to reach out to us on this panel to figure out about your logistical questions.
And I would add that XR and other climate activists that are coming have liaisons who are working, Jessica being one of them, who are working with the camps and are gathering questions. And so during the trainings, or if you have questions, put them in the chat here, and then we can add them to our logistical question list and not have everybody bothering the camps, but instead have a very efficient way of getting that information back to folks. And so be sure and let us know what you're thinking. And you can also send emails. There's an email that's provided at the bottom of one of the slides that we're going to put up here that you can send questions to, and we'll get them answered.
So before people come to McEasy, you know, I just want to make it clear what it is we're looking for and asking of you. You know, like, I don't want the traveling anarchist who's just coming here, you know, ACAB every day, you know, like ACAB, yes, every day, that's important. But like the men here, the officers here, I know them. You know, I've sat in ceremony with many of them, and that makes them family. Many of them are family. So if you come here, it's very important that you do not interact with law enforcement. You let the liaison do that and the locals do that. You know, traveling anarchists need to understand that, like, when you come here and you plug into a fight, you know, like, you get to leave. You get to leave, but I'm still gonna be standing here, you know, after we've stopped line 3 and all the live streams have stopped, all the traveling anarchists have gone home. I'm still gonna be here building upon the decisions that were made here, you know, and like, that includes the behaviors that you have with law enforcement, the interactions you have, you know, because anything that happens here falls down on my shoulders. You know, I have to carry that at the end of the day because I live here and I'm from here. So, you know, also there's multiple people, you know, as activists, we tend to, you know, we use activism almost as a drug. You know, it becomes our thing. We bury ourselves into the struggle, and until it becomes us. You know, here at Camp Migizi, we're going to ask you to heal. We're going to ask you to make this not just about fighting a pipeline, but by getting in touch with yourself, you know, because we're at the time where, like, we need to be ready to give birth to that 7th fire. You know, we need to be ready to heal and put our best foot forward. And we do that by honoring sacred warriors, recognizing each other's needs, and, you know, building support so that when we do move forward after this fight, we're ready to put our best foot forward to stop the next one and the next one and so on. You know, like, I don't want people coming here just to burn themselves out. You know, I want you honoring your needs. I want you recognizing your need for reconnection to the land, to the people, to the all who swim, all who fly, you know, because it's those connections that we make in this fight that's going to make us better people for the fight moving forward. This is the fight for humanity, and we need to be willing to fight for one another. So if you come here to Camp Migizi, please bear that in mind. Like, I'm going to ask you to heal, and I'm going to ask that, you know, you don't utilize this as a place to just bury and lose yourself in.
Thank you. Okay, any final comments from the panel? I'm going to kind of head us towards a closing here if not, but if there's something that people would like to speak to.
I'm just going to drop a whole bunch of links into the thread of all the camps and all the front lines and like all the things that like should be supported. It's not just about the two of us. It's not just about one camp. It's not about just one person. There's a whole bunch of people that have been working on this for many, many years. So if you're looking for a way to plug in, there's probably almost certainly a way that you can plug in the best way. There are all kinds of different folks who have been working on this project for a really, really long time because we all care about this, and supporting that is really important. And miigwech again for this space.
Thank you. So we're so grateful to you panelists, and to Jan, who's not here with us, but for her activist filmmaking team and bringing us together, to the courage and tenacity of Tara and Tasia and all the water protectors on the front lines working for all of our futures. And to Jessica for her leadership in bringing together this national mobilization and trainings for frontline support, along with others like Raz and Cindy. We're grateful
Can
to
I add something? I'm sorry to cut you off. I didn't know. Logistics and things. Okay, so I just wanted to note sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I think it's really important for a lot of us who are engaged in different struggles to be connected with one another and show that solidarity with one another. In Minnesota, Minneapolis, there was an uprising over the murder of George Floyd, and you saw people from all walks from different backgrounds come together and create space and create communities. I was really glad at the George Floyd Square to talk with others about Line 3, do trainings around Line 3. And I just say that because thinking about, what the vibrant and intersectional struggle we need to win, that means it means Black folks and Indigenous folks coming together, supporting mutual struggles that we're all impacted by. And I wanted to say that because that's what brings me to do this work as well. That we are stronger together. And I wanted to leave with that being my last thing to say. And lastly, I would encourage people to check out a zine called Swarm. You can find it on the Earth First website. It talks about Line 3, but also talks about a strategy of like people being like self-sufficient affinity groups who can go and do actions with respect and with leadership of Indigenous folks, do actions that disrupt the project. I think it's a really great zine to check out because it can really get us thinking about creative ways for us to engage in this work, and contribute and build upon the camp model of doing direct action campaigns to stop the project. So I'm going to put that link in the chat, and I'm going to leave with that.
That's great. Thank you very much. So we're also grateful to you all, the audience. Many of you supported the film screening fundraiser, and we want to remind folks that fundraising screening of necessity on Eventbrite is available through February 21st, next Sunday. Once you register for a date, you can watch it at your leisure anytime that day, and we hope that folks will consider supporting local actions, stop the money pipeline actions, and get involved in these COVID protective caravans to support folks on the front lines. You've heard how absolutely important that is. And if you think about it, folks have been out there for months getting records, it's one thing for us to come on and get a warning and then leave, but folks have been, doing this for months, and you can't have this.
Us have been doing it for years.
Years, exactly.
We've been doing it for lifetimes, for generations. Just to be clear, when we're talking about privilege, that's what we're really talking about. Not just this campaign, not just this moment, but generally, right? Like that's what we're really saying.
Thank you. So we're going to be organizing regional campaigns from the West. There's a group coming, and the East Coast and the South and the Midwest and the Rockies, and we have regional coordinators. So if we know you're interested, we'll get you connected up with the right folks. And in the upcoming trainings, Jessica and Cindy and Raz will be sharing and providing you with the knowledge and the connections you need. And so even if you can't go, you could sponsor folks. I know, like the Pacific Northwest Council of Water Protectors, some of the folks coming with us, you know, folks need scholarships. They need scholarships for travel and lodging, and organize GoFundMe drives in your local area, or earmark a contribution to the XRUS website for scholarships for folks that do want to come. And so once again, we're very grateful for all of the volunteers and climate activists who helped with publicity and putting all of these support actions together. And XRUS specifically wants to thank Jan and the Necessity team for their incredible generosity in both sharing the film and all of the technical support that they've provided to us for the fundraiser in this panel. So thank you. And don't forget to fill out the dot form survey so that we connect with you on the trainings, the regional caravans, and local actions. And we're going to have some slides at the end here that have some basic information about, you know, who you can contact, like not only the dot form survey, but also there's a address you can write questions to, an email address. And thank you all for being here.
And thank you and Tech for getting this all together. It was crazy and y'all made it work. So thank you so much for the work you did to make this happen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diana, for facilitating and moderating all of us and putting up with us. Putting up with me at least.
Thank you for sharing space.
It's a delight. It's a delight. Okay. So tech folks, can you put up some slides so that people can sort of see the, there we go. There's a what about COVID slide that at the bottom of it has the email address that we talked about. There's a slide about the trainings with the dates and times, and we'll be trying to send that out to folks that share information with us. And finally, there's the slide about why it is so critical to mobilize right at this very moment. You know, it'd be nice, you know, folks are like, well, you know, why not wait and come later? Well, people can do that, but Enbridge is pushing to have this done by June. And for all the reasons listed on this slide, this is a very critical time. So thank you all and good night.